There may be no more pressing equity issue for the economic mobility of residents in Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and Washtenaw counties than knitting together a better transit system. That statement didn't come from some liberals at the NAACP or even from us here at True. That was the central thesis of a major set of featured articles and guest commentaries at Crain's Detroit Business, the region's premier business publication. So why are they focusing on transit equity, and what did they learn? Here to tell us is Chad Livengood, who's the senior editor at Crain's Detroit Business and lead author of the feature. Thanks for joining us, Chad.
Hey, thanks for having me, Megan.
So Crain's is clearly a publication focused on the business community. Why did you choose to focus on transit equity? Tell us more about this forum you did.
Yeah, so the Mackinac Policy Conference this year, one of their pillars was equity and diversity, inclusion, and equity, and we started sort of chewing on what is an issue that we could kind of write about in our monthly forum section that would really kind of get at an actual equity issue that tangibly we could fix as a region. And I said, transit. I mean, we've been having this conversation about improving our transit system for half a century now, and I've been covering this issue in different capacities, both at Crain's and then previously the Detroit News. I covered the passage of the Regional Transit Authority legislation in the lame duck session of 2012, and we have very little progress to show in 8 years on this subject. And I mean, I'm an occasional bus rider myself, and I've done this partly out of convenience, but also sometimes I just want to see what goes on. And a few years ago, I wrote a piece about where at the time we were debating about having another regional transit vote in 2018, and the late Brooks Patterson, the Oakland County executive, he came out and said, okay, I'll only support RTA, which he wrote the bill to authorize. He said he only support it if if we could basically adopt this smart opt-out community map for RTA. Of course, Wayne County Executive Warren Evans and Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, they were vehemently opposed to this. Then, of course, you had the different viewpoint and worldview that Mark Hackle has in Macomb County. So at the time, I'll be honest, I wasn't as informed about how poor our transit system really is until I sort of asked a question aloud, well, how do you get from Brightmoor to 12 Oaks Mall for a job? And I went about trying to figure this out. I went on the map and in the app and such, and couldn't figure out real clearly how I would actually make my way there. And so what I did one day was I just set out, and it was a dead of winter, February of 2018. I went to Greenfield and Grand River in Detroit and got a bus and started taking the buses to figure out how to get to 12 Oaks Mall. Of course, you can't just take the 20-minute drive up Grand River. You have to ride a bus north into Southfield, and you have to transfer at like 11 in Greenfield, and you got to move to go to the Orchard Lake exit of 696 at the Oakland Community College. Then I had to transfer there, and then it took me to basically a Starbucks at Haggerty and 11 Mile, I believe. And maybe it was 12, but either way, then you have to get out and walk. And I found some people who've done this, where you've walked the last mile and a half from the Farmington Hills Novi border. And it was really, really eye-opening to me about what is really an access to jobs issue. And so this piece I wrote this month in our Crain's forum section, or actually September last month, really kind of tried to hone in on this issue and frame this up for the business community to think about differently, particularly employers who are in the service sector who are really struggling to fill jobs right now. And instead of the Novi Grand River pipeline, where we have Livonia opt out and Novi opt out and Wixom. I chose Ford Road because to kind of look at. I got on buses at smart buses at the Dingle Transit Center in Dearborn and started going west to see what it was like to try to get to a job out in the western suburbs of the area. Canton Township just kind of jumps out at me as a maybe the largest municipality in the Midwest without a single bus that runs through it. And Ford Road, just if you start at like the Imagine Theater on the east side of the 275 interchange, and then you just work your way west, there's a 4 mile stretch there where there is literally thousands of jobs that can't be accessed for someone who doesn't have a vehicle or someone who can't get a ride to work.
Is that something do you think is really resonating with folks in the business community? Do you feel like, as you said, the folks in service who need service employees are they seeing that connection to transit and the job struggle?
I think our big employers do, our big hometown employers do, and this is one of the disconnects that I've noticed with this issue. DTE Energy, rocket companies, even the automakers, they get this issue. The folks that have downtown Detroit workforces understand this issue, and then there are plenty of folks in the middle, that are smaller businesses or smaller, maybe auto suppliers and such. They understand this issue. I think where the disconnect is that you have that the jobs in the service sector are not like hometown companies. So, working at Starbucks, at Telegraph and 12 Mile is not the manager of the Starbucks that runs 3 or 4 Starbucks in Oakland County. He or she does not have, they may see this as an issue, but they don't necessarily have the political sway as a Jerry Norcia at DTE Energy does. And so because of that, we have this sort of, I say just the corporate class that is honed in on the subject, but there's all these other jobs and employers that aren't necessarily local businesses. They're not part of the business roundtable or the BL business leaders from Michigan groups or whatnot. And so they're not at the table in this discussion. And they're not leaning in on the county executives or the legislature, or whoever else is the policymakers who could have a hand in this. But like I said, I tried to sort of set out to sort of just frame this up a little differently, and people think about it, that if you're going to get serious about economic equity in this region, you got to get serious about making these bus systems or public transit in general much more accessible, much more frequent. We also did some reporting. Annalise Frank, my colleague who covers City Hall for Crain, she did some really good reporting about DDOT and looking into what was going on with DDOT. And then that prompted me to write a follow-up column about the driver shortage in DDOT. I wrote this catchy headline: "Flip burgers or drive a DDOT bus. DDOT's labor crisis is not rocket science." I mean, it just start at $15 an hour. At the same time, when Smart is starting drivers at $17 an hour plus, you can get paid this $7.50 hazard pay premium through the end of the year with CARES Act money that Smart's sitting on. Detroit has the same exact amount of money. Now, I talked to a source who's pretty well in tune to Mayor Mike Duggan's decision making, and the concern about having a a matching hazard pay for DDOT drivers is one, you'll boost their wages to the point where they're going to want to get paid more when the federal gravy train kind of runs out. And secondly, the other concern from the mayor is that if you give this to the unionized bus drivers, you have to give it to the unionized public works workers, DWSD, you got to give it to the unionized cops, the firefighters, EMS. And I try to make the point in that piece is, those are important jobs and public servants, but bus drivers play a much more underappreciated role in the people who actually get people to work in this region and make things actually happen and function on a daily basis. And so I think there should just be a special thing made for, and sort of to the heck with the union politics at City Hall. Got to get this agency running up or right again. I mean, there's only one reason why they're reducing routes is they simply are trying to get their on-time rates up to something that's actually acceptable. And right now, it's not acceptable. So they're cutting routes or reducing the number of stops. I mean, I think reducing stops on Woodward Avenue is a huge step back. I've ridden that bus up and down. Frankly, because it's way more dependable than the choo-choo train. And so, I mean, I've jumped on that thing because it stops every 12 minutes or so, and you can it's pretty reliable to get up and down between. If you need to go to News Center from downtown, that is the way to really go, is that Woodward bus.
Or it had been, but I've been hearing some prop stories recently of people having to wait 45 minutes for a Woodward bus that's supposed to come every 15. Yeah, you're definitely right that they've got to figure out what is it going to take to bring in more employees. Is it, if it's not hazard pay, is it incentive pay? Is it something else? Do you feel like, so you said you feel like some of the business leaders are understand this need, even if it's not always the people with the loudest voices. Do you think the leaders in this region are starting to understand this? And you did a similar forum 2 years ago. Do you feel like there's been a change? Do you feel like, do you have a sense of what needs to change?
I don't think Mark Hackel has changed his position. He's trying on a mission to fix roads themselves first before anything else that goes on the roads. And that's a legitimate issue. I mean, there is 800 some odd lane miles of road in Macomb County in poor condition. And it's actually, that's total miles. The lane miles number I got recently, Oakland County, still half of their roads are in poor condition. I think where this subject is hung up, and Eric Morris, the transportation consultant and head of the Detroit office for HNTB, he's worked for RTA as one of their lead consultants, and Warren Evans when he was making his RTA tax push a few years ago. He wrote a piece in our forum that I think is really a must read, and people can actually go to this. It's, if you go to crainsdetroit.com/crains, CRAINS-forum, or just click on special features and you'll find Crain's Forum Transit Equity on our homepage. Eric, and all of this stuff is in front of our paywall, so it's free content. It's public service journalism. But if you look at Eric Morris's piece, he's making an argument that we got to stop trying to make this same repeating, basically definition of insanity, repeating this effort to go after short-term property taxes. The 4-year smart millage is a recipe for continued political disaster. Essentially, is every time you have to go, renew that thing. I mean, we're not going to do an RTA tax next year on the ballot in November. There's no way they're going to try it because they don't want to endanger the smart tax, because they don't want to have both go down. Then you'd be really up a hill. And so Eric's point is we got to get to a different type of tax. He lays out an argument, and so does Dan Dirks, the former DDOT director, that a regional sales tax approach is what other regions use. It's very well used in like St. Louis and Kansas City, I believe Cleveland as well, and
most major metro regions
most major metro
fund their
regions.
transit through a regional sales tax.
Every major city in Texas does this. I mean, so that's all you kind of need to know, and so and that's a more fundamental, big picture issue of taxation in Michigan in general that the legislature would need to have a major debate. Probably going to have to amend the Constitution.
Yeah, I was going to say it.
In order to do it,
it's a constitutional amendment, and given that we couldn't get the legislature to even tweak the law that created the RTA, how do you think a constitutional amendment might work?
Yeah, I mean, constitutional amendments are hard to get on the ballot, either by ballot initiative or certainly by the legislature. It takes 2/3 vote in the legislature in order to put for both houses to put it on the ballot. But long term, this does seem like the way that we need to address some of these taxation issues in order to fund these type of services. The same goes for our roads. I've been kind of on this soapbox for a long time. The gas tax is actually, in fact, a dying tax. We are consuming less gas because our vehicles have gotten way more efficient in fuel. And as our own hometown automakers propel us into electric vehicles and we start electrifying the vehicle fleets, we are going to start phasing out internal combustion engines much faster than we probably any of us really think. And as a result, we're going to be just using way less gas. Now, the legislature.
I wonder if you could combine those to do let's put road funding on a 0.5-cent sales tax statewide, and then let's let counties choose whether they want to add a 0.5-cent sales tax for transit. And that way you get both road and transit funding that would be needed.
I think the only problem with letting counties choose is we would need to narrow it down. We would need to bunch in a few counties together. And specifically, we need to bunch in Wayne, Oakland, Macomb for sure, and Washtenaw. I mean, it won't work if Wayne and Oakland approve it and Washtenaw approve it, which will probably happen, and Macomb doesn't. Then you're just going to continue to have this Swiss cheese approach where you have one holdout, and of course, the county executives in Macomb will say, "Well, we are the only county that supports SMART," but again. You can't. The biggest problem with sort of investing in the infrastructure of transit or having like bus rapid transit is you need a stable revenue source long term, and these 4-year millages do not cut it. That's why the RTA millage in 2016 was a 20-year tax. I mean, I've been making this point to people lately. We as a region adopted a 20-year tax to support the zoo. And we did the same thing for the DIA museum, an art museum. I mean, we are willing to tax ourselves for 2 decades for giraffes and Picassos, but we're not willing to do it for transit. And I think that's really a misplaced priority. I actually spoke about this last week to the Michigan Realtors Association conference in Traverse City and tried to sort of make this point to them as well, that this does affect people. And I think these arguments about, well, I live in Kego Harbor and I don't ride a bus, it doesn't affect me. But again, if you're trying to go down to Telegraph to do shopping, and you're wondering why there's a line at the McDonald's, that's 25 cars deep. It's because there's 3 people inside there doing all the work. And
we all depend on the people who depend on transit. Even if you don't personally use it, you depend on those gas station workers or the fast food workers or the nurse at the local hospital or we definitely learned a lot about essential workers over the past year, and we definitely need to figure out how to get them to work. Well, thank you, Chad. I wish we could keep, I need to have you back on because we could certainly keep talking about this for quite a while. You made some great points. I really urge everyone to go to crainsdetroit.com, to the Crain's Forum. We'll make sure it's linked. It's a great way to learn, to hear a bunch of really interesting perspectives from about both the business case, but also the equity case for why transit is essential for our community. So I also want to thank our True members who make this show and all of True's work possible. If you're not yet a member, please do join us to support our efforts to transform transportation in the Motor City. And stay tuned for more great discussions here on Tapping into Transit. Thanks again, Chad, for your great writing and editing and for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me, Megan.
Have a great day.